Greetings all, D&Disability here. This is a reply to Professor Dungeon Master on his video over at Dungeon Craft, talking about skills and how we use them. So, first things first, he uses what he calls flex dice, and what many other RPGs or other game masters, including ones from 5th edition, right, would have had with advantage or disadvantage, etc. And really, as far as I'm aware, this mechanic started to become really popularized with Morkborg. Morkborg uses omens, right? Where you have this pool of dice, usually D2, maybe D3, maybe D4, of them, and it is random because that's how Morkborg does things. And those dice let you do things like deal extra damage, re-roll dice, lower damage dealt by a d6, just negate a crit or a fumble, or lower the difficulty by 4. So, say you need a 15, you burn an omen, it brings it down to an 11. So, why am I talking about Morkborg and skill systems, right? And that's because Morkborg is a skill system less, or a RPG system that does not use a skill system, right? So, which kind of gets to my point with this video, right? You don't need skills. You don't need a skill system. There doesn't need, right, to be proficiencies in athletics or acrobatics or persuading people, nor do you necessarily even need that high of a bonus. But I will say you don't need to use these flex dice or this kind of omens option either, even though I also like it. Looking at what people in the basic fantasy world have done, they've taken a slightly different approach in their optional rules. Alright, so here we have what is, in some ways, their optional rules system. I kind of use most of these. I don't really consider them optional rules personally, but as basic fantasy is a clone of, BX or basic D&D, it makes sense. And one of the things they do, which this is getting to the actual reply to Professor Dungeon Master, is that they vary the DC of the task you're doing based on the level of the character doing it. So that way it's almost always a fixed DC, right? If you're level 1, it's 17. As for a level 5, it's a 15. As for a level 10, it's a 12. And what this means is that the higher level you get, the more likely you are to succeed at these rolls, and the more stuff you can do. It's a great way to not worry about skill points or not worry about proficiencies or specific bonuses. And yes, this means at low level the players fail a lot of the time. But this gets to the main point with this style of RPG, both Morkborg and Basic Fantasy, which is assumed competence of the characters. We assume all of them can jump a small chasm without needing to roll. We assume all of them could ford a river without needing to roll. We can assume all of them could walk across a 10-inch wide steel beam 20 feet in the air or 100 feet in the air without needing to make a roll. It's only when you get into the extremes, that beam goes from being 10 inches wide to maybe 2 inches wide, as an example, that these rolls are called for. Personally, as a DM, I find that I only call for these rolls during combat. Or I'd call for these rolls and I would say, don't roll a 1, or don't roll a 1 through 3, right? And that's it. And even then, that 1 or that 1 through 3 just doesn't have anything to do with their stats, their ability scores, whatever. It has everything to do with the random chance of you step on that one slippery spot while walking across the log and, you know, you bust your butt and fall in. So, in conclusion, I would say let's go back to having skill systems that assume the competence of the players. If you like a simple character sheet, or as you know, some might say the non-existent character sheet, if you're playing with players with disabilities, or even characters with disabilities, say they're missing a hand or a foot, or they're blind or mute or something, right? All of these things might matter, but if you have a system that assumes proficiency, a lot of those trials, tribulations, a lot of the guesswork when it comes to bringing disability into your RPGs kind of falls away. Because if you have a system that uses skill bonuses or uses proficiencies or what have you, right? If somebody is blind, can they have proficiency in spot checks, right? No, not really, right? But then do they gain a bonus die when it comes to listen checks? Right? No, not really. So what do? We assume the character themselves has adapted, right, to being blind, or adapted to being mute, or adapted to missing that one hand. And while they may have only replaced it with a claw or a hook or whatever, right? They've learned to use that appendage or their skills to the best of their possible ability, which is what people with disabilities often do, right? Speaking as a blind man. So let's agree with Professor Dungeon Master here, right? And that flex dice and putting the power in the players to make their rolls are awesome. But at the same time, let's also consider, all basic skills to be proficient, and let's consider also the progression of the characters. By giving characters this kind of progressed from 17 to 16 to 15 to 14 all the way down to 7 at level 20, this progressed decrease in skill challenge, right? That makes them feel, right, that their characters have really succeeded in doing things, or can now succeed. And I can't stress enough, I only typically call for these roles during combat, right? If you're a level 1 uh, fighter or thief or whatever, and you're trying to swing from a chandelier and, stab an enemy in the face, right? Sure, that's a lot harder when you're level 1, you've had a lot less practice at it, right? Than, say, you're level 7 and you've now had, you've done it a few times, you've failed a few times, you're getting better at it, right? So think of it that way. Now, what could get really fun, and just positing this, is when you start to combine these two, right? For Morkborg, the set difficulty for everything is 12, which is, as according to this chart, about that of a 10th level character, right? With 5th edition, numbers are typically kept low. So, but, do what you want. I, for one, use this chart. My players don't complain too bad. Occasionally, they'll miss a roll by 1 or 2, and that's fine. They, but otherwise, it's not bad. So, let me know what you think down in the comments. Please like, share, subscribe, and let's keep using these skill agnostic systems, these non-skill based systems.